You keep saying you want a good man, a real man, a man who shows up, who stays consistent, who knows your worth without you having to convince him of it. But every time you end up in the same situation with a different face, a different name, and the same disappointment. And the truth is not as complicated as you think it is. You are not attracting potential partners. You are attaching yourself to potential projects. You are not seeing a man for who he is standing in front of you today. You're seeing a version of him that exists only in your imagination, a version that you created, polished, and perfected in your own mind. You meet him and you notice the charm, the confidence, maybe even the struggle. He tells you about his dreams, his plans, what he's about to do, what he's working on, what he could be, if everything lines up and something inside you lights up. Not because of what he is, but because of what he might become. That right there is where the story begins to go wrong, because now you're no longer dating a man, you're dating a possibility. And possibilities don't come with accountability. And possibilities don't come with accountability. Possibilities don't require consistency. Possibilities give you just enough hope to keep you holding on while giving you nothing solid to stand on. You start filling in the gaps. Where he lacks effort, you add understanding. Where he lacks consistency, you add patience. Where he lacks clarity, you create excuses. You tell yourself he's just going through something. You say he's not ready yet, but he will be. You believe that with enough love, enough support, enough time, you can help him become the man you see in your head. But here's the part nobody tells you. Straight, you are not his transformation coach. You are not his life builder. And it is not your job to raise a grown man into the version of himself he should already be working on. And what makes it even more dangerous is that he doesn't have to lie to you. He doesn't have to pretend to be something he's not, because you're already doing that part for him. You're projecting greatness onto someone who hasn't earned that title. You're assigning value where there's only intention without action. And then when he fails to meet those expectations, you don't get mad at him right away. You get confused. You wonder what changed. You start questioning yourself. You think maybe you didn't do enough. Maybe you asked for too much. Maybe you should have been more patient. But the reality is, nothing changed. He's been showing you who he is from the very beginning. The inconsistency was there. The lack of direction was there. The half effort was there. The half effort was there. You just chose to focus on the small glimpses of what he could be instead of the consistent evidence of what he actually is. You held on to moments instead of patterns. And moments will lie to you, but patterns never do. See, when you're addicted to potential, you start to romanticize struggle. You think loving someone through their confusion is a sign of loyalty. You think standing by someone who isn't showing up for you is a sign of strength. But there's a difference between being supportive and being self-sacrificing to the point where you lose yourself. There's a difference between believing in someone and ignoring reality. And the hardest truth you're gonna have to face is this. Some of these men are exactly where they want to be. They're not confused, they're comfortable. They're not lost. They're choosing not to grow. And as long as you keep rewarding that behavior with your time, your energy, your attention, they have no reason to change. They have no reason to change. Why would they? They're getting all the benefits of your presence without having to step up into the responsibility of being the man you deserve. So now you're stuck in this cycle. You meet someone, You see potential. You invest emotionally. You wait. You hope. You give. You pour. And eventually you break. And then you tell yourself you just had bad luck, or you keep attracting the wrong men, or there are no good men out there. But it's not about what's out there. It's about what you're choosing when you see it. Because the right man doesn't need to be imagined into greatness. The right man shows up as a finished product in terms of character, consistency, and intention. You don't have to decode his action. You don't have to guess where you stand. You don't have to build him into someone he's not. But if you're used to chasing potential, that kind of stability might even feel unfamiliar to you. It might feel boring. It might feel too easy. And that's how deep this pattern goes. You've trained yourself to associate love with uncertainty, effort with struggle, and connection with fixing something that's broken. At some point, you have to ask yourself a real question. Are you in love with being loved? Or are you in love with the idea of building someone into who you want them to be? Because those are two very different things. One leads to peace, and the other leads to constant emotional labor. One builds you up, and the other drains you slowly while convincing you that you're doing something meaningful. And until you break that attachment to potential, you're going to keep finding yourself in the same situations. Different man, same story, different promises, same outcome. Because you're not choosing based on reality, you're choosing based on imagination. And imagination feels good in the beginning, but reality is what you have to live with every single day. And when you finally decide to shift that, when you start paying attention to actions instead of words, pattern instead of moments, consistency instead of chemistry, that's when everything begins to change, because now you are no longer investing in what could be, you're choosing what already is. You say you want respect, loyalty, consistency, honesty, and a man who chooses you without hesitation. You say you're tired of being played, tired of being confused, tired of being the one who cares more. But if you really sit down and look at your patterns, look at what you allow, what you excuse, what you keep going back to, there's a hard truth staring right at you. You don't attract what you want. You accept what you believe you deserve. And that belief doesn't come from nowhere. It's built over time. It's shaped by your past, your experiences, the way people have treated you, and more importantly, the way you responded to that treatment. Every time you tolerated disrespect and stayed, every time you lowered your standards just to keep someone around, every time you convinced yourself that this is just how relationships are, you were reinforcing a message to yourself. You were telling yourself that this level of love, this level of effort, this level of inconsistency is all you can expect. So when a man comes into your life and he gives you half effort, half attention, half commitment, it doesn't feel right, but it doesn't feel unfamiliar either. It fits into the story you've been telling yourself. And because it feels familiar, you stay longer than you should. You try harder than you should. You give more than you should. You give more than you should. Not because he's giving you something amazing, but because somewhere deep down, you don't fully believe you deserve something better. And here's where it gets even more real. The moment you start questioning his behavior, the moment you start feeling like something isn't right, instead of walking away, you negotiate with it. You start making adjustments to yourself instead of demanding better from him. You talk less so you don't scare him off. You accept less communication because he's busy. You tolerate inconsistency because he's busy. You shrink yourself just enough to fit into a situation that was never designed to hold your full value. And now Instead of being in a relationship where you feel secure and appreciated, you're in a constant state of emotional anxiety. You're overthinking texts, analyzing tone, wondering where you stand, questioning your worth based on how he shows up on any given day. And the crazy part is, you start blaming yourself for his lack of effort. You start thinking maybe you're asking for too much. Maybe you're too emotional. Maybe you need to be more understanding. But wanting consistency is not asking for too much. Wanting respect is not asking for too much. Wanting clarity is not asking for too much. The problem is not just standards. The problem is that you don't enforce them. Standards without boundaries are just wishes. And wishes don't protect you from being treated less than you deserve. See, people don't just treat you based on who you are. They treat you based on what you allow. The moment you accept something once, you're setting a precedent. The moment you forgive behavior without change, you're giving permission for it to happen again. And it's not because you're weak, it's because you're hoping he'll change, hoping he'll realize your worth, hoping that if you just love him the right way, he'll step up. But you can't love someone into respecting you. You can't care enough for both people in a relationship. And you definitely can't build a healthy connection on one-sided effort. What you allow will continue. What you tolerate will repeat. And what you excuse will grow. So when you say you keep attracting the wrong men, it's not always about attraction. Sometimes it's about selection. It's about what you choose to keep in your life after you see the signs, because the signs are always there. The inconsistency, the lack of effort, the mixed signals, the emotional unavailability, it shows up early. But instead of walking away, you stay and try to prove your worth to someone who's already showing you they don't value it. And that cycle continues until you decide to break it, until you decide that being alone is better than being undervalued, until you decide that your time, your energy, your peace is too valuable to be given to someone who treats you like an option. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It takes awareness. It takes honesty. It takes looking at your own patterns without sugarcoating them, because it's easy to point fingers and say, all men are the same. It's harder to look in the mirror and ask yourself why you keep entertaining the same type of behavior, why you keep giving chances where there should be boundaries, why you keep investing in people who haven't earned that level of access to you. And the answer usually comes back to one thing. You still working on believing that you deserve more, not just saying it, but truly believing it at your core. Because when you believe it, your actions change, your tolerance changes, your decisions change. You don't chase, you observe, you don't overgive, you match energy, you don't stay where you're not valued, you walk away without needing closure. And that's where your power is. Not in trying to change someone else, not in trying to fix a broken situation, but in choosing differently, in raising your standards and actually standard on them, in recognizing that your worth is not determined by how someone treats you, but by what you allow into your life. Because the moment you truly understand your value, not just in words, but in behavior, you stop accepting less. You stop settling for confusing. You stop making excuses for inconsistency. And suddenly, the same things that once felt normal start to feel unacceptable. And when that shift happens, you don't just attract differently, you choose differently. Because now you're no longer operating from a place of doubt or insecurity. You are operating from a place of self-respect. And self-respect does not negotiate with disrespect. You see the calls, the texts, the late night check-ins, the thinking about you messages, the thinking about you messages, the sudden bursts of attention that make your phone light up and your heart race at the same time. And you take all of that as a sign that he cares, that he's interested, that he's serious about you. Because in your mind, attention equals effort, and effort must mean intention. But that's where the misunderstanding begins, because attention is easy to give, but intention requires responsibility. Anybody can send a message. Anybody can say the right words. Anybody can show up when it's convenient for them, when they're bored, when they need company, when they want validation. Attention doesn't cost much. It doesn't require consistency. It doesn't demand accountability. It's something a person can give you in moments without ever having to commit to you in a meaningful way. And if you're not careful, you'll start building emotional attachment based on these small, inconsistent gestures that feel bigger than they actually are. You start measuring his interest by how often he reaches out instead of how consistently he shows up. You start feeling secure because he texts you every day, even if those texts never lead to real plans, real effort, or real progress. You tell yourself, if he didn't care, he wouldn't be calling me, without realizing that people can care about your presence without having any intention of building a future with you. They can enjoy your energy, your attention, your time, and still not see you as someone they want to commit to. And that's where confusion takes over. Because in your mind, his actions are sending mixed signals. One day he's all in, calling you, making you feel like you're the only person in the world. The next day he's distant, unavailable, inconsistent. And instead of recognizing that inconsistent as a clear answer, you focus on the moments when he shows up. You hold on to the highs and try to make sense of the lows. You start chasing the version of him that only appears when it's convenient for him. But here's the truth that changes everything. When a man has real intention, his actions are clear, consistent, and aligned. You don't have to guess. You don't have to analyze. You don't have to decode his behavior like it's some kind of puzzle. Intention shows up in effort, in planning, in consistency, in the way he prioritizes you, even when it's not convenient. Intention doesn't disappear when life gets busy. It doesn't fluctuate based on mood. It doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. Attention, on the other hand, is unpredictable. It comes and goes. It feels strong in the moment, but it lacks direction. It gives you just enough to keep you interested, but not enough to build anything real. And if you're not paying attention to that difference, you'll end up investing your time, your energy, and your emotions into something that was never meant to grow. You start making excuses for him. You say he's just busy, he's stressed, he's going through something. You justify the lack of consistency because the moments of attention feel so good. You tell yourself that he'll come around, that he just needs time, that what you have is building slowly. But what you're really doing is accepting a situation where you're being emotionally engaged without being truly valued. And over time, that starts to affect you. Begin to question yourself. You wonder why he's not doing more. You start comparing your situation to others. You feel like you're giving your best, but you're not getting the same in return. And instead of pulling back and reassessing, you lean in even more. You try harder. You give more attention in hopes of receiving more attention. But attention is not something you can earn by overgiving. It's not something you can inspire by being more available, more understanding, more patient. A person either comes with intention or they don't. And when they don't, no amount of your effort is going to create it. All it does is keep you stuck in a cycle where you're constantly giving without receiving the kind of clarity and commitment you actually want. The hardest part is letting go of the idea that attention means something deeper than it does, because it feels real, it feels personal, it feels like connection. But real connection is built on consistency, not convenience. It's built on clarity, not confusion. It's built on actions that match words, not words that sound good in the moment. So now you have to shift how you see things. Instead of getting excited about how often he reaches out, you start paying attention to what those interactions actually lead to. Are there plans? Is there progress? Is there consistency over time? Is there effort that goes beyond the surface level? Because if all you get in is attention without direction, then you're not in something that's growing, you're in something that's keeping you occupied. And once you start seeing that clearly, you stop confusing temporary interest with genuine intention. You stop attaching meaning to inconsistent behavior. You stop building emotional connections based on moments that don't have a foundation. You start asking better questions, setting clearer expectations, and most importantly, walking away when those expectations aren't met, because you deserve more than someone who just checks in when they feel like it. You deserve someone who shows up with purpose, who communicates with clarity, who invests in you with consistency. And that kind of connection doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't leave you waiting. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth. But as long as you keep mistaking attention for intention, you keep finding yourself in situations where you feel close to something real but never actually have it, where you feel seen in moments but invisible in the bigger picture, where you feel wanted when it's convenient but forgotten when it's not. And that's not love, that's confusion. Dressed up as connection. You've been letting feelings make the decisions for too long. You feel drawn to someone. You feel chemistry. You feel that spark. And suddenly, all the warning signs don't matter. All the inconsistencies don't matter. All the red flags get ignored because your heart is doing the talking and your mind is left in the background, waving and hoping it catches up eventually. But here's the truth. Feelings are powerful, but they are not reliable guides for choosing the right partner. Feelings can be misleading. Feelings can be temporary. Feelings can trick you into seeing what you want to see instead of what actually is. Every time you let a strong emotion override your standards, you're giving permission for someone to occupy a space in your life that should only belong to someone worthy of it. You fall in love with the way someone makes you feel, not with the way they treat you. You fall in love with their charm, their attention, their humor, their confidence, and you forget to look at the patterns that actually matter. The way they handle conflict, the way they handle conflict, the way they show respect, the way they prioritize you when no one is watching. And that's where so many women get trapped, because it feels right in the moment. It feels exciting. It feels like connection. It feels like love. And our culture, movies, social media, and stories have all told us that if it feels intense, it must be right. But intensity is not a substitute for integrity. Passion is not a substitute for consistency. Chemistry is not a substitute for character. And when we ignore that, we end up in relationships that are unstable, confusing, and ultimately unfulfilling. You have to learn to lead with standards before you lead with emotion. Standards are non-negotiable rules about how you allow someone to treat you. They are not wish lists or preferences. They are boundaries that protect your peace, your time, and your worth. Standards are the litmus test that show you early on who is capable of giving you the kind of love you deserve. When you lead with standards, you make your expectations clear, you communicate your needs, you hold people accountable, and you do not bend those standards to accommodate feelings that don't align with reality. But leading with standards is hard because it goes against everything your heart wants to do. Your heart wants to hope, to forgive, to give more chances, to see the good instead of the patterns. Your heart wants to believe that love will fix things, that love will change someone, that love will make them rise up to meet you. And sometimes it even convinces you that enduring inconsistency or ignoring red flags is a measure of your strength, your loyalty, your capacity to love. But strength is not measured by how much you tolerate. Strength is measured by how well you protect yourself while still being open to the right person. Think about it. When you consistently let emotions make decisions, you end up compromising on everything that matters most. You lower your standards to fit the person instead of letting the person fit into your standards. You accept less effort, less respect, less clarity. You rationalize behavior that would have made you walk away if it had been anyone else. You ignore patterns that tell you this is not the person who will honor you, cherish you, or build with you. And the longer you do that, the more likely you are to repeat the cycle with someone new. Emotions are powerful motivators, but they are temporary. They peak, they fade, they fluctuate. Standards, boundaries, and clear expectations are what create stability. If you rely solely on how someone makes you feel, you're at the mercy of their moods, their choices, their timing, and their ability to consistently show up. And the hard truth is, many men will make you feel something amazing for a while. But if they are not willing to match your energy with effort and intention, that feeling will eventually leave you empty, frustrated, and questioning yourself. Leading with standards also means learning to listen to your instincts, not just your emotions. Your gut often senses inconsistency before your heart does. Your intuition picks up on patterns of behavior that your feelings want to overlook. If something feels off, pay attention to it. Don't wait until you've invested too much to recognize that the signs were there all along. Too many women have looked back and realized they knew better all along. They just didn't act on it because the feelings were too strong. You also have to understand that boundaries are not punishments. They are protections. They are statements of self-respect. They communicate to the other person without ambiguity how you expect to be treated. When you establish clear boundaries early, you filter out those who are not serious, not ready, or not capable of giving you what you deserve. Boundaries prevent heartbreak. Boundaries prevent wasted time. Boundaries prevent emotional exhaustion. And they create space for the kind of relationship that is built on mutual respect, effort, and genuine intention. The other thing to remember is that feelings can sometimes blur the truth about compatibility. You might feel a connection, a spark, an attraction, and assume it's enough. But attraction alone is not a foundation for a lasting relationship. Shared values, aligned goals, mutual respect, emotional availability, and consistency are what make a relationship sustainable. If you prioritize chemistry over these essentials, you are setting yourself up to be disappointed when the initial excitement fades and the reality of who he really is becomes undeniable. Leading with standards also means learning to say no when someone doesn't meet them. It's not easy. You might feel guilty, worried about hurting their feelings, or afraid of being alone, but saying no is a way of saying yes to yourself. It's choosing to honor your worth. It's refusing to settle for less than you deserve. And when you practice that consistently, you train yourself to attract men who are capable of meeting you at your level. Men who can match your effort, respect your boundaries, and value your presence without manipulation, confusion, or half-hearted attention. Ultimately, letting feelings dictate your choices is like trying to drive a car by only looking at the rearview mirror. You're focused on what you hope will happen, what you imagine could be, instead of what is actually in front of you. And until you learn to lead with standards, boundaries, and clarity, you will continue to attract men who excite you temporarily but fail to sustain a real connection. Men who stimulate your heart without ever fully showing up for your life. Men who make you feel something without actually being capable of giving you what you need. And the shift begins the moment you decide to put your standards first, to prioritize your worth over your feelings, to demand clarity before giving your heart. To demand clarity before giving your heart, and to walk away when actions don't match emotions.